Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. In the background, that little ball of brown is Chewbacca. In the foreground, this is a packet of Great British bacon, unsmoked bacon, which Chewie may get to sample a bit later on in the session. I've had some encouragement on Twitter from Max Lange, which I really appreciate. And this has led me to kind of rifling through his games, and this has led me to think I should feature one of them and actually do a session on the Max Lange attack, and that's Max Lange up there. 19th century German chess theoretician and creator of chess problems. It's made me think we could do a session on the Max Lange attack and the Scotch Gambits. These are useful lines to have in your repertoire as a white club player, because you can play openings like the Spanish, which is probably objectively a little bit better, probably. But black has so many ways of meeting that. I mean, he's got the Berlin, he's got the Marshall counterattack, the Archangel, the Zaitsev, the Shigorin. You know, it just goes on and on and on. The Kozio defense. Some of them are very solid, like the Berlin. Some of them are very sharp, like the Marshall. Some require a lot of theoretical knowledge. So the good news is there's a lifetime of fascination and study. The bad news is if there's a match on Thursday and your captain wants a result, some of these lines might be more practical. So let's have a look what's going on here. So our friend Max Lange is playing white, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. It's a kind of normal opening sequence. So black can avoid this by playing the Petrov or the Latvian or openings like that, but black's playing knight c6. White plays pawn d4. Now, there is an alternative way into these sort of lines. You can play bishop c4, and that's just different. I mean, it allows bishop c5, so one has to know what to do against bishop c5. There is some chance of transposing back in, but it's all very complicated. You could play pawn b4, the Evans Gambit, which has a similar quality to the Max Lange attack. It's a similar sort of, tactical, interesting attacking opening. But anyway, Max Langeman's not going to play bishop c4. He plays pawn d4, which is the Scotch. Now there really is no bishop c5, right? Because it just gets taken. So black plays the best move. He takes it off. Now the main line of the Scotch is for the knight to take on d4. But here we're going to play the Scotch Gambit, so bishop c4. This is a reasonably good move, and it's pretty hard to meet for black. I mean, black essentially has three decent options. The first is knight f6. I mean, if we just think about this. So, black's won a pawn, white's attacking it twice. So in this line, black can say, right, I'm going to develop a piece, and I'm going to attack white's e-pawn, which is actually tricky to defend. White doesn't bother to defend it, he just castles. Black then goes ahead and takes, and all of a sudden you just say, wow. So white has now gambited his two central pawns, which is clearly a big deal. But can black survive this? Black king's right in the centre, far from castling. First thing is the knight gets pinned. Black defends it with pawn d5, and then white just goes ahead and chops that pawn off. Now, that seems to just lose a bishop, because queen takes. But knight c3 is a kind of wonder move. Now, there are at least two pins on the board. The d4 pawn is pinned, because if it takes, black drops a whole queen. The knight is pinned, and now this white knight is forking the queen and the knight being attacked twice. So black usually plays queen a5. White then picks up the knight, so restores piece equality, although still a pawn down. But white is a pawn down, but the king is in the centre. There's a discovered check on the board. The king is not close to castling. Black can play a move like bishop e6, but there's a lot of complicated stuff going on here. There's a lot of chances on both sides. It's a really interesting line. So after knight f6, there's a lot. I mean, that's not the only way white can play. White doesn't have to castle here. White can play pawn e5, for instance. Black's also got bishop b4, which leads to fascinating complications. Today we're going to focus on bishop c5, which is what the opponent played. The black player played bishop c5. White then responds with, I think, the best move, c3. Again, castles is completely playable. You can get into moves. Actually, this I think is called the Max Lange attack proper. Knight f6, pawn pushes to e5, so now white is attacking that knight. In response, black attacks the white bishop, and actually now white can't take en passant. Well, he can, but all of a sudden he's no longer attacking the knight. So white just chops off the knight, black chops off the bishop, and then we were discussing this on Twitter. There's two ways to go. The first is you can take this pawn, rook comes over to g8, and then you've got bishop g5. So, you know, the king's on an open file, the queen's attacked. The black is certainly not castling kingside in this line. There's all sorts of... Again, this is a balanced position, but it looks... I wouldn't want to play the black side of this. Looks really, really hairy. Instead of taking on g7, also, white can just go ahead and play the check. On the open file, bishop goes in the way. White can then attack that pinned bishop. Black defends the bishop, but then white has this wonderful move, knight c3 again. So again, two pins on the board. If the pawn takes on c3, white can just chop off the black queen, and black cannot take back with the e6 bishop because it's pinned by the rook. So this knight is immune. Queen's attacked, she can go here. Then this knight can now jump because this knight's attacked. It's attacking the bishop. If anybody knows what's going on here, please just let me know in the comments, because it is clearly a fascinating, rich position. Black might castle queenside. That might be an idea just to get the king to some kind of safety, but it's a fascinating position. So that would have been if white would have castled here. White played pawn c3, which I think, as I say, is the best move. Now it looks here a bit like black can take this pawn, with white taking back with the knight, and a sort of typical Gambit position where white's got better development and black's got a pawn. But actually, white's got a better move. White's got bishop f7 check, king takes, queen d5 check. When the king moves, you pick up a whole bishop. Well, you recover the bishop that you sacked on f7. But all of a sudden now, the king is stuck in the centre, and I think white's quite a bit better here. So taking the pawn, this taking move is not a great move. Black played a better move, knight f6. And now, actually, white can take here on d4. And this is a transposition back into the mainline Italian. So, for instance, I think the mainline move here is bishop b4 check. Moves like bishop d2, bishop takes on d2, knight takes on d2, etc. So you can actually, white has the option of going back into the mainland Italian, and it's quite interesting the way there are transpositions between the Italian and these kind of Scotch Gambit lines, basically because you're playing bishop c4, d4, it's the same sort of moves, so there's ways of transposing back sometimes, often. So, but Max Langemann didn't do this, he didn't take on d4, he pushed d5. So now, Aronian has been playing this, Levon Aronian has been playing this in the traditional Italian game. So there's a game, Aronian against Dingley Wren, where Dingley Wren played d5, and then Aronian played bishop e2, backing off this way. So now the black knight's attacked, so knight e4, takes, there's a check from the bishop, bishop in the way, knight takes, black castled, white castled, and then Dingley Wren played pawn f6 to get rid of that annoying e5 pawn. In the end, Aronian won this game, actually. But at this point, it's all to play for. But at the end, Aronian won this game. So here, Aronian's played bishop e2. Max Langemann has actually played bishop b5 here, which is also a popular move and more in the spirit of the Scotch Gambits. His opponent thought hard about this, and he thought, look, my knight's being attacked by the pawn. What do I do here? Now, the usual move here is to move the knight to e4 to get it out of trouble. Black decided to pin the pawn against the king, which is completely understandable. I mean, it looks like that pawn's attacked twice by the knight and the queen, although actually the knight's pinned. So after black castles, maybe it's attacked twice. And it looks like this stops the threat on the knight. The only slight problem is the minute white castles, you kind of start to think, maybe this e-file is more of a weakness than a strength. Because, again, this knight is pinned, but say it wasn't. Say you would have takes. You've got rook e1 pinning the queen against the king. Then the knight can go in the way, but then you've got f3 attacking the knight. And all of a sudden, I mean, I assume black's losing a piece there. All of a sudden, that open file is a weakness. So Black plays the best move, knight e4. I mean, would have been better a tempo earlier, but, you know, this is a blitz game, so, you know, it's not easy stuff. Gives white the chance to take back on d4 with tempo, attacking that bishop. So there's no check on b4 anymore because the king has departed. So bishop goes back to b6, which again is pretty typical in these lines. White develops his final piece. Black chops it off. Now, this isn't a bad move. I think the slight issue here is this strengthens the d4 pawn significantly, which was a little bit of a weakness beforehand. And also, we wonder about the prospects for that dark square bishop, because how's it going to get out? It's going to take a long time to untangle that dark square bishop. So white takes back, black castles, and then white starts to point his pieces at the black king's side. So bishop d3, and we'll see this is a very significant move. This has implications later on. Black develops his last piece, which is an intelligent idea, pinning the knight, getting that last piece into play, all very good. White puts the question, what are you going to do with that bishop? Are you going to exchange it on f3, give me the two bishop advantage, or are you going to back off? He backs off, but now white's got space for his king. Luft, as we say. You know, there's a square, so there's absolutely no back rank mates, although back rank mates are a long way away in this position. But you never know in chess, you know. It's good to be prophylaxis, as they say. It's good to take measures against future threats, even if they're a long way off. Players like Petrosian were absolute experts in that. So we've got some prophylaxis. The king has got some air here, some space. The bishop's backed off. We've got options of g4 later on if we want it, if we need it. White plays a really good move here, pawn a4. So this is doing two things. So moves that do two things are really good moves. This is doing two things. The first is it's threatening bishop a3, skewering the queen against the rook, defended by the rook on a1. And it's also not yet threatening pawn a5 to trap the bishop. But if that knight on c6 moves house, goes anywhere, pawn a5 traps the bishop. So it's further just tying up these pieces and restricting their ability to do things, really, the knight and the bishop. So pawn a4 is really good. Black moves his f-rook to e8 to stop this bishop move losing material, but white still makes it, just developing the bishop with tempo. It's a really good thing to do. Black plays queen e6. Now, two questions here. The first question is this a mistake? Second question is, what does white play next? So you might want to pause the video. You might want to spend 2 or 3 years thinking about this. You might want to phone a friend who's a grandmaster. You might be a grandmaster, in which case, please tell me what's going on. But the question is, what does white play, and how is white doing here? So white's move was bishop h7 check. And you can see the ideas here. The idea is that if the king takes, well, if the king doesn't take, that's a pawn. And also weakening the king's shelter. If the king does take, knight g5 is check, forking the king and the queen, and also opening up an attack on that loose bishop, which we just pushed around with the pawn. So there's a lot going for this move. Now, it ain't that simple, because it may be that these threats strangely kind of cancel out, but we're going to see. So what do we think black does? What's your guess as to what black does? Well, on this occasion, black, and this is a blitz game, I imagine black had to think for quite a while here. Black played king h8. But I think what we need to explore is the critical line. What happens if black takes king h7? Well, knight g5 is the move. Check. So the first thing to say is that if the king backs up to g8, this is bad. It's not bad because of the fork of the king and the queen. Because just taking on e6 isn't particularly good, because then black can chop off white's queen, and basically white's a piece down. White and black both have a piece each hanging, but white's a piece down, so white needs to be able to do something here and get his knight out or something. Now, if he could take on c7, forking the rooks, that might be useful, but actually that's just covered now by the b6 bishop. So this position, white's lost, or white's certainly, with best play, white's lost. So the point is, taking here on e6 wasn't the right thing to do. The right thing to do is just to pick up that loose bishop. And all of a sudden, it makes perfect sense. That bishop on h5, now we're attacking the queen. We're threatening an uncomfortable check on h7, and also we're attacking the f7 square. White's a pawn up. White's just better here. So the king can't back off to g8 after the check. The king has to be brave, and you get this quite a lot with these kind of sacrifices on h7. The king has to be brave and trot out to h6. Now, usually with the queens on, bravery is not advised for kings. They're fragile, they move slowly, and these other big pieces can do them enormous harm. But here we notice a new dynamic because the king is defending the bishop on h5. So the king has come out to defend the bishop. So, White's idea of just taking the bishop is completely different now. I mean, it actually doesn't really work because if White takes on h5, you can take on h5 with check, king takes, knight takes, black takes, and black's just a piece up. So taking on h5 is not a particularly good move. The really interesting question is now, can White take the queen on e6 and profit from that? And the answer is actually really complicated. So to visualise this at the bishop takes h7 point, I suspect it's something that Carlsen could have done. It's something that the really top players could have done. But for mere mortals like me or, most players, it's really hard to visualise because you got knight takes e6, bishop takes here, but now White has a new resource because with the king out on h6, White has bishop c1 check. Now this is significant because every single king move allows White to get the knight out. So king h7, knight comes out with check and it's defended. Next move, White's taking the bishop and White is one pawn up and winning. Well, winning with best play. King g6. Knight f4 check. Again, the knight's come out with check. The knight's defended by the bishop, and White is picking up the bishop on d1 next move. King h5. Even worse. Knight g7 check actually wins the rook at the back. So that's not recommended. So all the king moves don't work. But Black has this one resource, g5. And now what? Well, White can take with the bishop. I mean, chess is so beautiful, isn't it? All of this depth, all of these options, it's incredible. Take with the bishop, but then the king moves here, and again, White's losing a piece here. So White's a piece down, and they're both losing a piece. Black's losing a piece, White's losing a piece, and so White's going to end up a piece down. It's not good enough. So bishop takes is not good enough, but White does have knight takes, and now the white knight has escaped and it's defended. So the black bishop has to run. And now the question is, and again you have to visualize this way back, can White utilize the discovered check here? And the answer is not really. White can win a pawn, but that's all. So this, double check, winning a pawn. King here, the knight can jump out, that's fine. But White's got 3 pawns here for a piece, and actually the engine prefers black. I mean, who knows how a human would prefer, but black's a little bit better here. So what all of that says is actually, with best play and, a powerful engine, black actually should have taken the bishop on h7, but you absolutely cannot criticise White for playing that in a blitz game, and indeed we'll see that it works, in the game setting it works to White's advantage. So king h8, bishop backs off, and now White's a pawn up. The cover around Black's king is compromised. If you could beam a queen onto h7, that's checkmate. And it's forking the king and bishop, but more importantly, it's checkmate. All sorts of interesting options. Black's trying to activate this bishop, trying to do things with this bishop, which is completely locked behind the pawn chain. White defends the pawn. Black's bringing a knight around. I think White maybe figures that bishop hasn't got many prospects, so just chops. Now the queen is moving around in an attempt to unpin itself, unpin the knight, and start to attack the black king. Black is quite rightly creating some activity on the queen side. The queen comes here to unpin the knight. Black pushes, but White's just getting on with it, attacking the queen, creating various other threats. And at this point, unfortunately, Black's flag fell. I think it was still an interesting game, although White is better on the board and clearly better on time. And I suspect that bishop h7 move just probably consumed a lot of Black's time. But, you know, what we learned, I think this is quite a typical Max Lange game, because basically what's happened is white has got really good attacking prospects. He's got that pawn on e5, cramping the black king side. Really good prospects for a kingside attack. Now, black can sort of win these games, basically, by staying solid, defending well, in a kind of elite player style, and then, you know, grinding out the end game. But frankly, that happens in lots of chess. That's possible in lots of chess openings. So I don't think that's a particular problem for the Max Lange attack. If black can navigate the tactics, then black can aim for an equality. But again, that's not that's quite common. So I think this is a really interesting opening. I'll be trying it a lot more in the future. I've really enjoyed analysing it. I'm so grateful for the feedback on Twitter. And so all that remains is to open this packet of bacon, rustle around inside it. Chewy! Chewy! Oh, he's so tired. Come on, Chews. We're filming this at 11:15 on a rainy lockdown night. Come on, you. Ugh. But you know what? It's cheered us up. Being able to look at this game has cheered us up. Chewbacca does not bite the hand that feeds, do you? I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please do press the like button. And if you want us to send more videos, when I say us, I mean me and him, please press the subscribe button and press the little bell, and you'll be notified when more videos come. I hope everyone's enjoying lockdown, or if you're not locked down, lucky you, and we really look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.